live in central Pennsylvania in the dead of winter. For those of you in South Africa, it is, of course, summertime. Another horrific farm attack in South Africa, and this time the farmer refuses to succumb to the attack by the criminals, dare we say, terrorists who are attacking him. As is another farm attack in lawless South Africa, this time the heroic, determined farmer refused to succumb and survive the horrific attack. Local farmer Johan Leroux, who was shot on his farm near Kruger Mpumalanga Airport on Sunday afternoon, February 11th, is currently in stable condition in hospital. Leroux, who was shot multiple times on his farm in White River in Mpumalanga, walked 2 kilometers before finding help. Now, reportedly, he is positive while in the hospital recovering. In a great deal of pain, he underwent surgery yesterday and was scheduled for surgery again today, this time to reattach the nerves in his arm that was broken. The 66-year-old farmer was on his riding lawnmower on his White River farm near the Kruger and Mpumalanga International Airport when he was ambushed and shot multiple times by gunmen on Sunday afternoon. Now, the assailants then dragged Leroux into his house, tied him up, and left him for dead. A high-tech security company official in White River told News 24 that after his attackers fled with cell phones, guns, and his bakkie, it's a pickup truck for the international audience, Leroux managed to free himself before making an excruciating 2-kilometer trek to his farm workers to get help. ER-24 paramedics said that Leroux sustained multiple gunshot wounds and a broken right arm, and as we now know from the hospital reports, also nerve damage there. Leroux's vehicle had a vehicle tracking system installed in it, and Kaylin Herbst of AG Solutions traced the vehicle to where it had been abandoned near the airport, the Kruger and Mpumalanga Airport. Ladies and gentlemen, this lawlessness land of South Africa and the danger that rural South Africans find themselves in is appalling. It continues unabated, with the African National Congress's comical, ludicrous president, who also happens to be Republican, or the president of the Republic of South Africa, declaring in his so-called State of the Nation address just a few days ago, the crime was being dealt with and handled in South Africa. This is a total lie, a fabrication, an absolute ridiculous, insulting embarrassment for South Africans and foreign nationals who travel to South Africa and have to deal with this nonsense, absolute nonsense. Unbelievable. Now, I reported on this situation multiple times in the past 4 years, covering the reason why South Africans in the rural areas are so vulnerable, and that is because of the ANC's negligence and its intentional dismantling of security measures that were meant to protect rural South Africans in remote locations. Things, for instance, like the Commando System, a system of reserve units comprised of 168 different regiments dotted throughout the rural countryside of South Africa. Now, the ANC, over 15 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, claimed maliciously and fraudulently that the Commando System was a product of the apartheid era. That's simply factually incorrect. The Commando System grew up in a Minuteman-like sort of military organization which provided rural security for many South Africans. They did cordon search operations, seizing tons of illicit drugs and narcotics. They responded to rural insecurity when the police were unavailable, and they helped protect people in the rural areas. Now, this system grew up from, as I said, a Minuteman approach hundreds of years ago, not during the apartheid era, which began in 1948 and ended in 1992. No, it's from many years ago, centuries ago, and it's a system that the Basotho themselves engaged in to raise forces to fight, as well as the Trekboers and the Griquas, among others, who raised local people who got their gunpowder, got their weapon, got their saddle, put them horses together, and rode off for common defense in the face of an enemy who was threatening their communities. This is a long-held practice, not just in South Africa, in many parts of the world. It was formalized over the years and became part of the defense system, and they were involved in law enforcement as well. And as a consequence, the African National Congress did not like them, and they called them a racist organization and disbanded them. But the truth of the matter is that the Commando System, the 4 newest regiments, when the system was disbanded by the corrupt African National Congress nearly 20 years ago, the 4 newest regiments were almost entirely Zulu. Every member was a Zulu in KwaZulu-Natal province, and it was actually the only formal employment that many of these people actually had. But they did a positive net good for rural security. Make no mistake, folks, people talk about white genocide. That is a topic that the media likes to run with. They like to, not so much anymore, but they use it to get clicks and to get subscribers and to make money by trying to create this situation in which genocide was being perpetrated on white South Africans. While white South Africans are certainly targets, farmers in particular, in South Africa for this sort of crime, this has a lot to do with a political objective to chase people off the farms by frightening them and terrorizing them, and also has a lot to do with criminal syndicates who have much to gain from this and organize these events. When you see farm attackers arrive on CCTV in the middle of the night with body armor, cell phone jammers, and radios, you know something, and police issued service weapons, you know something more is going on here than simple random crime. This is unacceptable. The Commandos were an effective system that made a difference. They weren't perfect. They didn't solve the whole purpose, the whole crime issue. Their purpose wasn't law enforcement, their primary purpose, but that's a role that they were fulfilling for many, many years, and it had an impact. When the ANC withdrew those forces, they put nothing in their place to protect rural South Africans. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, if you live in rural South Africa, you are in jeopardy. Your life is at risk to these criminals and these criminal syndicates, and also those avowed racists who have an agenda to murder minorities. That's also an aspect of this. As far as the concept of genocide, proving a genocide against those in rural areas in South Africa will be as difficult as the ANC's ludicrous case to claim that the Israeli response to Hamas terror attacks on October 7th was genocide. There's no evidence of that. Genocide is a very clear definition. But what is clear is that the government of South Africa does not care about rural South Africans. And we've seen the idiotic comments from ANC members of parliament, comments like, why do we need commercial farmers? We get our groceries from ShopRite and from Pick and Pay. Where do you think it comes from? And we see the idiocy of the lockdown situation when the government banned the transport of alcohol, which greatly damaged the wine export industry, among other things, not understanding the impact on the agricultural sector from their actions. This is a rapacious kleptocracy that cares nothing for the brown. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jew, or a traditionalist, they don't care about you. They care about how they can fleece money out of the economy and take it from your pockets and enrich themselves, and how they get their blue light escorts. And if you don't realize this by now, you ought to wake up. But what a horrific situation farmer Johan de Roo faced. He was wounded at least 6 times from media reports, shot 6 times at least, a broken arm with severed nerves, tied up and left for dead, bleeding in his home as they robbed him of his cell phones, of his weapons, and of his truck. And he walked 2 kilometers, wounded that gravely. Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're black, if you're white, if you're brown, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Jew, and you live in rural South Africa, for that matter urban, but rural, response times from law enforcement are painfully long, and you're on your own. This is one reason why many South Africans have armed themselves in rural areas to protect themselves against this rapacious sort of theft. Clearly, the government of South Africa has no regard for your lives. They don't care about your lives. They just pontificate and steal. That's what's going on in South Africa's government, certainly with the ruling party in power now. And their aspiring replacement, the economic freedom fighters, are no better and more likely far worse. And that's the reality, folks, here. But what an amazing situation. Unfortunately, I've dealt with far too many cases of South African families who suffered horrific losses, black, white, and brown, the murder of their loved ones, their torture of their loved ones, the horrific circumstances that these people find themselves in, and the survivors have to deal with what's happened afterwards. Far too many families I've been in contact with. This is a situation that should be a priority crime for the police, but they ignore it because the perception is it's mostly white folks. And this government clearly doesn't care about white folks. But the reality is that this affects all South Africans. When a commercial farmer's life is taken and a farm falls apart, it affects more than that commercial farmer and their family. It affects an entire community. People who worked on that farm, those who they supported, their dependents and family members, the businesses that got business from the farmer and the farm workers for living, grocery stores, tuck shops, spas, shebeens, whatever it is. All of these things are affected, and the knock-on effect is horrific. These crimes against humanity targeting rural South Africans must be stopped, and the African National Congress is not the party to stop this. They do not care about South Africans, and certainly not about rural South Africans. It cannot be made any more obvious. The murder of a successful black cattle farmer 4 years ago in the Free State led to no changes. The murder of an Indian woman sliced her throat from one side of the throat to the other, across her neck, 4 months pregnant, in the presence of her children in the next room, meant nothing to the South African government. The brutal panga machete slaying of Edward Neumeister, a 70-plus-year-old Austrian immigrant who lived in South Africa since 1970 peacefully, in his closed during lockdown restaurant, German-themed restaurant in KwaZulu-Natal, elicited no sympathy or empathy from this corrupt government. None whatsoever. Folks, you must go to the polls in South Africa in 2024 and vote. Stop making excuses. The DA this, the Freedom Front Plus that, Action SA this, that. Stop it. Go vote for anyone that's not the African National Congress and is not one of these ludicrous parties standing up right now. Go for an existing party that has a chance to be part of something like a coalition that can change the trajectory of South Africa's future. 2024 is a seminal year for South Africans, for Americans. Our future is at risk. Don't fall prey to their nonsense. Vote for who you believe your conscience will make a difference. It certainly isn't the ANC. They're worse than the National Party. The only thing the National Party had going against it is it had racist laws and excluded people. If you take that apart, their governance was 10 times better than what you see from the ANC. That's not a defense of the National Party, that's just a statement of fact. They built infrastructure. They built entire corporations. They shouldn't have been doing that, but because of the racist laws, found themselves in that situation. Folks, what an incredible tale of survival here by Johan Leroux, a farmer in Mpumalanga province, located about 30 kilometers northeast of Nelspruit. This man has survived. What a horrific situation. Thoughts and prayers to Johan Leroux and his family. This man in his 60s took more gunshots than many combat veterans, and he walked 2 kilometers to get help. God bless, and let's hope the best outcome for him, and that these criminals who are cowards, they didn't have to shoot this man on a riding lawnmower. They could have simply grabbed him and tied him up, but they shot him because they wanted to murder him. Why did they want to murder him? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but you can suspect it has an awful lot to do with the skin pigmentation. Racist criminals in South Africa, facilitated by a corrupt government that doesn't prosecute criminals. Thanks a lot for your patrons, folks. Be sure to share this live stream with others. We'll catch you later. God bless and be safe out there. And once again, congratulations to the tenacity and the clinging to life and determination, the constitution of one Johan Leroux, who saved his own life, and to the emergency services people who stabilized him and saved his life, and to the surgeons who've operated on him, and to those in security services who try to make a difference in all of South Africa. God bless and be safe out there, folks.